welcome to another exciting interview. I can't speak English. I'm so excited. And our first Coloradan. Yay. Very excited to state represent. We are honored to talk to Dr. Jack Schaefer, one of the gentlemen running is it the Parting Clouds Institute, Jack?
Yeah, Parting Clouds Daoist Education. Yeah. Close enough. You got it.
Awesome. Again, I'm having trouble with English, my friend. So Jack, your road to Daoism started here in Colorado many years ago, maybe with just martial arts and movies. Would you kind of tell us your martial origin story, and we'll get to how you got to the Daoist work that you're doing today?
Dude, I love people's martial origin stories. They're always so fun to hear. Especially, I think, if you're in your like 40s and 50s, there's a lot in common there. When I was a kid, for whatever reason, I actually really don't know. I really loved martial arts. I thought it was really awesome. I wanted to do it. I talked about it all the time. I had a lot of energy. My dad was in the military, and so when he was in the military, he learned some of the military combatives and a little bit of judo and boxing. And so he taught me some stuff as a kid, and I got really into it. And then, so my parents, when I was really young, like 7, 6, somewhere in that neighborhood, they stuck me in a judo class at the college. And I loved it, man. Judo was great. I went to tournaments, and I did that for quite a while. What I really wanted to do was karate. And that was partly because I lived a few doors down from the guy who would end up being one of my first karate teachers. And I'd go down there and I'd look in his window and I'd see all his karate stuff. And, he'd come and go with his gis and his belts and his arms. And man, it was so interesting to me. And he was really, really great. And he'd come out and talk to me and, throw the ball and stuff, but he wouldn't teach me until I was older. And so he became actually my first striking arts teacher. When I think I was around, 12, something like that, when I started working with him, and so that was really my foyer into Asian culture. I don't really know why I had such an affinity to it. I loved it. Everything about it. When I was a kid, I wanted to learn, Japanese and Chinese. And I remember I had a book. My mom gave me a book when I was a little kid to try and learn how to write Japanese characters. And I remember, do you guys remember the old Shogun movie, the original?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
The series. I remember trying to learn Japanese terms by watching that show. It was, I don't know what it was, but I just had this affinity for it. When I was about, 13, 14, I was given a copy of the Daoism as like my first Daoist book. And
wow.
I read it probably, I don't know how many times when I was that age, but it didn't really make much sense, and I didn't really know what to do with it, but I thought it was something that resonated with me, but I didn't know what it was, and so my first karate teacher and my father, who was really into Buddhism at that point, taught me some of my first meditation, and, then it just kind of, from there, momentum. I started studying with other teachers and made my way into Chinese martial arts in my 20s and made my way to China and acupuncture school and all that kind of stuff. So,
do you remember what style of karate you were training, Jack?
Yeah, man. It was an Okinawan Shorin-ryu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It was Okinawan Shorin-ryu. And we actually, interestingly enough, we did Goju-ryu too. My teacher at the time, He was a Shorin-ryu guy, but his first teacher was John Roseberry, who was a Shoei Shobukan. He was a Marine Corps judo champion, and he also was in Okinawa in the 60s, and so he studied Goju. And so my first karate teacher, that was one of his teachers. And so we would do Shorin-ryu, we'd also do Goju-ryu, and we'd also do judo. It was great. It was the bomb for a teenager. It was very fight oriented, lots and lots of sparring. We had guys that would, it was super fun.
That's awesome.
It's definitely something I had to grow out of.
Right. But with the Shorin-ryu, even the Goju, were you guys doing a lot of skill based training, or was it more of a strike oriented? Would you say strike and kick?
Yeah,
based? It's going back. I know that's going back a couple days.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I would say like compared to like my Bagua teacher, for example, compared to that, I would say no. I would say compared to like a lot of Okinawan karate people, yeah, I'd say it's about average. There was a fair amount of detail, but there was also a lot of block hard, hit hard, move fast, be strong, be quick, that kind of stuff. And I think that's why I worked as a young guy, to be strong and fit and all that stuff. But really, like I look at some of those guys that I still know who are older than me now, who were like senior to me at that age, their bodies are wrecked.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that was really a thing that really was hard for me and definitely pulled me away. Was I didn't want to have that body when I was in my 50s or 60s,
Yep.
Absolutely. And was that here in Colorado, Jack?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, they were a good crew. Most of those people aren't around anymore. I think that whole organization has kind of fizzled and gone the way of the dodo, which is, it happens. That's martial arts. I think traditional martial arts is a dying thing, no matter what, where it comes from. It's not keeping up with a lot of the stuff that's out there now.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad. I think it has a lot to offer, especially a young person. Especially a young person.
Yeah, I mean, I dug the discipline. I liked the discipline. I liked the organization of it. Really worked for me as a kid. I think I couldn't have done something where I had to be self-motivated, because I think it's just, but if you brought me in there and said, do 100 of these and then do 100 of these and do 100 of those, I was in, I could train for hours. But if you said, just go train for 4 hours, I'd be bored. I don't know what I would do. Not at that age.
Where did you start with your Chinese Kung Fu, dipping your toe into that water?
That's cool. That's a cool question. I got really lucky. So when I was in my early 20s, so I was pretty lucky because that whole karate lineage, they were really my teacher was really open to me learning with other people. And he had this idea of like, hey, if I can't teach you somebody, teach you something, one of my jobs is to find you somebody who can. And I got really interested in Okinawan weapons and Kobudo. Yeah. And it just so happened that, I know you had Russ Smith on a while back.
Yes.
Kimo Wall was bringing, Shimpo Matayoshi through the country, and I got introduced to him. And so I started training with Kimo, and I trained with Matayoshi while I was in the States, but I wouldn't really say I was a student of his. I worked with him a bunch of times and he was amazing, but, he was an old guy and he fell asleep on the bleachers and, but Kimo was great. And I had a really amazing relationship with Kimo, and, he'd stay at my house. He'd come through and stay at my house every few months, and I'd help him put on seminars, and I'd go visit him in different places and whatnot. But we were training, and one day he looked at me, and we were talking about the fact that when he was in Okinawa, they would learn medicine as well as martial arts. So they would stay after class and they would do acupressure and massage and things like that. And how that was a really important part of training was being able to take care of your body or your students or whatever. And he just looked at me and he goes, look at my body. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, if you watch me walk, I don't walk very well. I can't kick very high. He's like, by the time you're 30, you need to be training something else. I don't want you doing this anymore. And he said, I want you to explore Chinese martial arts. And so, in the 90s, he introduced me to Chang Yi Liu, the feeding crane kung fu guy.
Yep.
They were pretty tight. And so when he was coming through the country, I met Chang Yi Liu, and I got really interested and kind of inspired by his family and their, how they did things and whatnot. And I didn't really get to know him super tightly until the 2000s. When he started coming back to the States quite a bit. I actually hosted him multiple times. He'd stay at my house, play with my baby, we had a really cool relationship at the time. But anyway, so Kimo's like, you need to explore Chinese martial arts. That said, the only thing he had was his friend who did Feeding Crane. And
Sure.
He's like, you can go to Taiwan and learn from them if you want to, and that was definitely something. I've told this story before. It was definitely a possibility because I could learn medicine from them too, but I couldn't get a license to practice medicine in the States with a foreign apprenticeship. So I decided to go to school instead. And so what that led me to, though, is I met a friend in school who was a Xingyi guy. He was in Tangshu Dao. And so we got to be super tight. And he was a student of Vince Black. And he kind of showed me some Xingyi, and I started to fall in love with Xingyi, and I ended up getting involved with Tangshu Dao. And so I spent several years with them. And then, when I came back to Colorado after living in China, I worked with Mike Bingo for a while, who, when he was still alive. So I spent time studying Xingyi with. Since then I've done Xingyi with a few other people. But I would say my journey through Chinese martial arts kind of started really randomly like that. But it was in the early 2000s, like around 2000, 2001, something like that. I met Schaefer. And Schaefer was, I think he had a lot of things that I was really interested in that I, at that point in my life, fit those curriculum that I was instructed I should look for. I needed some form of medicine. I needed some Qigong. I needed some longevity exercises, and I needed a decent martial art. I was hypercritical of a lot of Chinese martial arts. I got to be honest with you, because, a lot of the stuff I saw was really terrible. The Kung Fu guys around town, they didn't really know how to fight. And I came from a school where we fought a lot.
Sure.
And so, it was weird. And Shay, like him and He Jianbao, everything that they did hurt like hell and worked really well. And one thing I thought was really cool was they weren't focused on making something look nice. They just were focused on that it worked. The Qigong, the form, the application, that was their whole thing, was just that it worked. And I was like, okay, this guy's amazing. I'm going to get to know him a little bit more. And so I split back to China. This would have been my second time to China, and spent time with him then. And I would work with him all morning and He Jianbao all afternoon. And I would do that for weeks at a time. And then I'd come back to the States, and then I'd go back again and come back to the States and go back again. And I did that pretty religiously until Shay died. And then I would, after his funeral, I would just go work with He Jianbao. And, I got lucky enough too, at that same time that after he died, I met Shay's first ever student was a guy named Liao Shichang. Liao Shichang became a student of his in the 50s. Liao Shichang was a Shuaijiao guy, and he was tall. I mean, he was over 6 feet tall. He was really tall, even as an old dude. And he was known for just being really strong and being this just badass Shuaijiao guy. And Liao Shichang tells this story, how he met Shay. And he's like, Shay had a reputation. And so he goes to challenge him. And Shay is just like, okay. And Shay was really little. And he was maybe, 130 pounds. He was a tiny dude. And he smacked Liao Shichang in the liver and knocked him out. So Liao Shichang tells the story. He's like, he wakes up and he just looks at Shay and he toes and he's like, Father. I just begged him to teach him from there on out. Liao Shichang was a nut, but he had some really cool ways of doing things. And it reminded me a lot of how the 64 post-heaven Gao style line drills. That's how Liao Shichang would practice. So he would do his circular forms like you see a lot of the in-style Bagua guys do. But he would take those things and he would do them in a line, just like 3 or 4 moves at a time. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the Xingyi, maybe it was the karate. Something in me clicked. And I was like, okay, this is cool. I see I see this now. And something happened, and it changed my whole perspective on Bagua.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's a long answer to your question.
No, that's a great, that's what we're here for.
Yep. Yeah. I was going to ask you, in terms of your experience with Shi Pei Qi and your experience with He Jianbao, like, I know that they had different frames and they were different, they had different perspectives on different backgrounds coming into their martial arts. And so from your perspective, getting to be able to study with both of them, kind of what would you say the emphasis is for each one of them had, and then again, how that impacted you and how you perceived like what you were doing in the art?
That's a cool question. You're right. Like Shay he was a pretty small dude. And, and also when I met him, he was pretty old. And so, he wasn't real physical anymore anyway. And, He Jianbao, he's a big guy. We're built almost the same, and so it was really like easy to mimic He Jianbao, but I really found Shay Peiqi's movement very aspirational for me because he was flexible, he was quick, and he was really wily. His ability to sort of roll around things and Jianbao, while he could do that, obviously, he also was like a bulldozer. If he wanted to, we used to call this one position, he would put himself in the battleship because people would come in and then he would sort of backstep and he's a little bit sideways and his hands are facing you. And it was just like how a battleship comes in and swings sideways and points their guns at the ship. That's what it was like because you knew he was just going to mow you down at that point. And, but Jianbao, at least the time when I was really working with him, he was very focused on lots of power, and I think that came from his influence. So he wasn't Shay's first disciple. A guy named Liu Fang who ended up dying in a car wreck. But when Jianbao was younger, he lived with Liu Fang, and Liu Fang, he did Xingyi and Pao Chui and whatnot. And he used to, he'd say with Xingyi, I protect myself, with Bagua, I protect my family, and with Pao Chui, I just learned to hit hard, and that's about it, but so he really, I think Jianbao liked the Pao Chui. I mean, I can't put words in his mouth,
sure, but
he liked that hard power. And Shay, he managed to get a lot of power, but being very, very light, he was very light and quick. And so I found I really aspired to having Shay Peiqi's body because Jianbao's body was easier for me physically.
Sure.
I don't know if that answers your question, but because they were really different, and I wanted to be, at 6 foot and 200 plus pounds, I wanted to be more wily, not just like mow people down because I had decades of mowing people down,
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Is the spice of life.
Even I have a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so even in Jiu-Jitsu, like it's still easy just when you're a big dude just to mow people down, no matter what people say, you just mow people down. What attracted you to go from something like a Chinese Bagua and Xingyi and try throwing on the gi again? I loved grappling a lot. And I mean, even in college, I did judo in college just for fun, just to stay active. And I grew up doing so much sparring that I missed the free sparring that we would have. And, I was teaching Bagua but you can't really free spar with many of your students, for a lot of reasons. Either they're just not good enough or they're not willing to because you're the teacher, so they hold back a little bit. Or, it just gets weird. And I had friends who did karate and Muay Thai and stuff, but I'd spar with them sometimes. But also, I didn't want to get hurt.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? Like being in my
sure.
30s, I didn't want to go to my clinic with hurt all the time from sparring. And I knew like in jiu-jitsu, I could go and I could spar and I could spar every day and I would be maybe tired or sore, but I wouldn't be hurt. Now that was then. I gotta be honest with you, like some of my most lasting injuries are from jiu-jitsu.
Sure.
I've got some pretty significant, I've had some pretty significant injuries, training with those guys, but it was fun. The other part about it is one of my favorite parts of Bagua John is I like the puzzle of it. You know, there's so many transformations that happen. Like when you're faced with an application, it's like there's this answer. I feel like it's a game, right? It's somebody gives you an attack, and then you have an answer, and they have an answer to your answer, and then you look for another answer. I know Wing Chun guys are like that too, right? At least it looks that way to me. I have zero Wing Chun training, but I love the answer to the answer to the answer. Like, that's really fun for me. And that was BJJ too. It was like, man, there's an answer to my attack here. I got to find an answer to that answer. And then it's like, you know, who can come out on top? Who's got the last answer? You know, that was what made me, that's what kept me in there, I think, you know, was the play.
I love it. And yeah, I can't speak for all of Wing Chun, but I would agree with you 110% on that. My own Sifu is a PhD in educational psychology and cognitive development. And so the way he presented it to me was, okay, yeah, it's a martial art, but two, it's a problem solving. He presented it as, how do you answer, just like you're talking about, how do you figure out the puzzle? If somebody's going to give you a statement, whether it be a fist or a kick or trying to throw you, how do you answer that? You know, so very much so.
Yeah, I love that. You know, like I remember one of the first times I worked with Shay, we were talking about things and he's like, why wait for an attack? You know, he's like, start the fight. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, that's nonsense. Let them punch first. He's like, just make them do something. You know, you can feign them into some attack. He's like, you got to control their mind. And so he would do things like start with a stab towards the eyes, you know?
Ooh,
so you start stabbing towards the eyes, that creates some reaction, and it creates a reaction that you know they're going to give you. So then your counter is really much easier because then you have something to take control of. And then, you know, if I flank them, I know they can only do certain things, so I can start controlling them more and more and more, you know? And so it's in our system, the animal snake is known, they call it moving with the force. And what it really means is at first you're moving with their force, like whatever they're doing. That doesn't mean you can't start the fight, but it means that they're good with whatever direction they move their hand or their reaction. But pretty soon they're on their heels and they're moving with your force and they don't have a choice. Like they're going the way you want them to go. And that really like resonated with me a lot because it's like, oh yeah, you can just kind of take control of people's mind in that way, make them do what you want them to do. And then it's much safer. You know, I can steal the angle. Then I only have one arm and then I can control that arm. And then I'm better off. And that was the way I would think about jiu-jitsu too, is, you know, if I go from one position, I only give you one way out, and that way out leads you into a trap, you know?
Right.
That worked for me really well. And I think a lot of Bagua is that way. You know, watching people like Yusen Yang or, Lo, like, well, I've seen video of Lo doing stuff and you can see he sort of controls people and sets up traps, you know? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, Owen, you could probably comment more on that than me, but it looks like he sets up traps for people.
Yeah. He's very good at that. You know, it's giving you like one or two choices in a particular position or situation. And then, you know, and both are going to be a big problem for you when you arrive there. So yeah. That's exactly right. I was going to ask, you know, cool. And I know that now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe your Bagua system has like 8 animals.
Uh-huh.
And so do each one of those animals like teach a different type of skill set? So you were talking particularly about the snake and then its relationship to, you know, setting up these positions, but, does each animal have a different concept that way? Yeah,
that's definitely the way it works. You know, so there's 8 animals and each one has like a predominant tactic to it. And within that tactic, it has its own sort of power generation and then its own sort of strategies. So, for example, lion, which is the Qian trigram, the most yang animal, that's the one everybody's supposed to start with. And when you do lion, the things you think about lion is like lion takes over space. Lion is like a bulldozer. When you watch like on the nature channels and you see a lion attack a zebra, like they knock the zebra down, they blitz it.
Yep.
Like, so when you look at a lion application, a lot of them are the person was standing here, the lion techniques come in and that person is like knocked on their butt or out of frame, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Whereas like Qilin, which is the Kun trigram, is completely opposite. So Qilin, it'll show force and then it kind of disappears from there. And so people fall into empty space. So it's completely opposite. And then all the other animals are basically just, the children of those two. So, Phoenix is wind. So it's really quick and dodgy and darty. And, they all have their specific tactics like that and power development. So how they generate force, like lion's force is whole body force. So it's like, it almost looks robotic when you do power development exercises from lion, because everything is like trying to get your hands, your feet, and your dantian into one movement of harmony so that you can hit whole body. But they don't all do that. So like some of them are really just upper body, and some of them are a little like monkey is really kicking and low body focused. And then so what we did then is you have each animal, and then inside each animal you do tactics of the other animals. So it's like this is lion doing phoenix and this is lion doing monkey. And so they get really, they definitely get inbred, like sure. You could get super stiff about it. I think when you're learning in the beginning, especially, I definitely remember geeking out on like how different they were. But when you watch those guys who are really good at it apply it, they're really fluid. It's like, oh, that's like he did a dragon move and a phoenix move, and all kind of mushed together. Mm-hmm. But
I asked Lowell once. We were talking about training, and then we were talking about fighting, and he was like, yeah, fighting is fighting. Training is training. He's like, when you fight, he's like, just forget all that stuff. It's just like, it's like just what's coming out is hopefully what you've trained. And
like we always say, practice it big, use it small, Mm-hmm. Like you think about like a movement where you're flanking, like we have a tactic where we say, step diagonally and then attack horizontally, for example. And you might, when you do that, like step into like a nice deep low stance, and your application is big and strong and like really large movements. But then when you actually come to like a live sort of person throwing it fast and hard with intention, even though it's coming, it might look more like Enshin karate or something where your stance is kind of high, you're moving really quick, the moves are short. But the idea would be that if you practice it really big like that, then you're more likely to get more power. Mm-hmm. But that's what they say. I don't know.
And I know you had mentioned like some straight line practices, and I was wondering if were those something that Shipeichi's student had sort of come up with from his experience with the system, or was that in the system itself?
Yeah, some of it, my understanding, Owen, of Bagua, and is that there weren't really a lot of forms. There were a lot of skill development exercises and tactics, and then you would just apply those to whatever movement you wanted to do it. And so, in style Bagua, they took it and they really formulated it. And I think that's because when Xie was learning from Mun Baojun, he started as a little kid, and I think Mun really systematized it for him so that he could remember it. Mm-hmm. And then it sort of stuck, right? It's like, oh, okay, so we've got this animal and it's got these 8 attacking methods with 3 variations, and then, each of those has 3, and, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, it's really, there's this force, like use this force and this kind of body mechanic. And so I think what Liu Shitong did was he took combinations from either drills he learned or forms and just put them together in a way that worked for him. He was crazy because he liked to test stuff. So I remember he told me a story about how Shay started teaching him bear. And like the first week he goes out learning bear, he goes and picks a fight with a boxer and got beat up, And he's like, bear sucks. Bear's really hard to use. Like he was a crazy person. But I think one of his geniusness was he would look at combinations. And so he would either take 2 or 3 moves out of a form and run them in a line drill or make up his own. Our forms are super short. They're only 7 moves. So there's this idea that self-defense is like 1 to 3 moves maximum, and a fight is no more than 7 moves in a single exchange. So like, and you guys have sparred, when you're sparring, like how many moves do you have before you break? Yeah. And the idea would be that like a form is really no longer than that for us. So it's 7 moves is the limit.
That's cool. And
what we do then is we practice them. First you practice it smoothly, like just trying to get the harmony. And then you practice it where you're executing as much force in the correct way as you can on every move. So you're just developing power. Then what we do is we call Hunyuan Ichi, which is like you do the whole form as fast as you can on one breath. So because it's only 7 moves, it's not too hard, but say you go from the first bridge and then you're just exhaling one breath all the way to the last move. And that last move is the like kill move, so to speak. And then what you do then is you practice it where I'm going to let my force out on the 3rd move or the 4th move. And so that would be that place in the puzzle where we have the exchange, and the exchange is I did this and he did that and I did this and he did that. And then this is the one that got through, and that's the one where I let my force out. And that's where I finish my exhale. Or if you were like a karate guy, that may be where your ki is or something, like, so that since they're so short, you could even take the whole form and run them in a line drill then. And that's one of the ways we're supposed to practice it is you're supposed to do them in a circle, and then you're supposed to do the whole form in a line drill. And usually what I tend to do is I will take the form and I'll break it into like 2 or 3 moves and drill it that way. And think of the first move as the bridge, and then the next move or 2 is the counter, and then the next move is the bridge, and the next move or 2 is a counter. Trying to drill in that sort of reflex of sudden response to an attack so that you can finish the fight, Because I do feel like there is a little bit of a danger in sparring, and I don't want to sound, I'm going to sound like one of those Chinese kung fu guys who say you shouldn't spar because it's too dangerous. There is a danger in sparring, though, in that people get accustomed to like agreed upon like combat.
Sure.
And they start holding back on each other. They start like not finishing things.
Yeah.
They get, it almost gets too lax, and, it has to be something that's really explosive and aggressive. Like my son, who's 14, he does karate right now, and I watch them spar, and he won't watch this podcast, so I don't have to worry about this, but I watch them though, and, and it's too agreed upon. The sparring is too agreed upon. It's too like, it's too fun almost. And I think that's the danger is if it gets too playful, then it's too hard to finish, So I don't know what the answer is, because you can't flatten each other either, because then, that's why the Kyokushin guys made all those rules, like you can't punch people in the face, and because they just couldn't flatten each other nonstop,
Yeah.
That's wild.
But,
what's interesting about because I'm a baby at Bagua, as Owen will tell you, maybe even more than a baby. I might still be in the womb itself. So, but I will tell you that what you're talking about with your Bagua and the animals sounds very similar to the 5 elements, 12 animals method of Xingyi. And I find that very fascinating. And since you do Xingyi, do you find, of course, there are different systems, but do you find the way that the animals are expressed in Xingyi a little bit similar?
Totally. Yeah. I'm not very good at Xingyi, so I don't consider myself an expert at it. I love it, and I do it a lot, but I wouldn't teach it, Like I would feel out of line, but I do feel like the tactical response from like a pt1 and a peng-chuan and, Chuan-chuan and all that, like the tactical response is cool like that. And, I was thinking about it today. I was practicing, and I love this idea of horse, have this drawing the hand back in and then that pounding. So it's like horse has that kind of pounding power, that stomping. And at the same time, it's the one where you're doing, I don't know how you guys do it, but where you're drawing your hand up to your face and then you're coming back out. When somebody is attacking and you're on the inside gate, right? And so their attack is more like a haymaker. And so you're inside that haymaker and you can advance on them. Like a horse is a big animal. So you could actually flatten them with your body and punch them backwards, And it's like, that's a cool tactic. And if you really committed to it, I think you could, really drop somebody on their butt. And so in answer to your question, yeah, I mean, I think that's cool like that. Although I don't connect with it in the same way that I do with Bagua in that, like the horse I know, for example, I only know three versions of it. And they're all kind of the same, you're from the inside, you're from the outside, you're sort of waving, they're not really hugely different. So I don't see as many variations to it. I'm sure there are people who are good at Xingyi wood. But I love the difference in power between something like horse and tiger, for example. That sort of almost shoving of tiger with a little shock in it versus that pounding of horse. When I was in years and years ago, I got to work with Liang Chen. And I'm sure you've heard Tim Cartmill talk about Liang Chen, right? Yep. And Liang Chen, like he was pretty old at that time. But you could definitely feel the difference in the power of his applications when he would do something like horse versus tiger. Like tiger, you would feel like you're being shoved and then like a little jolt in you. And horse would just felt like it was just a stomp, like it just shocking you, you without the shove.
That's awesome.
And Bingo was the same way too. Bingo had some of that too, for sure.
Horse is one of my favorite animals too. I know 3 of Owen's 4 or 5 that he knows. And I could just do horse all day. I just horsing around all day, if you will. Yeah.
I think horse is cool.
I do too. I do too. Are you currently continuing your martial journey these days? I mean, I know you're still practicing and what you have is, a lifetime's worth of work. But are you working with anybody new these days, or are you running a little group, anything like that around Colorado?
Well, I'm a super curious person, and I like to cross train because I think that it helps me sometimes like discover things, Sure. And so, I have lots of friends who do other arts, Xingyi and Dai Xingyi and monkey boxing. And so nobody I study really serious with, but I love to do exchange, even if it's just conversational, because I think those conversations sometimes like turn on lights and it's like, oh, that's what that's about. Now I understand that, or that's how I do this without making myself feel crappy, or because, you don't want to feel like some training, right? Like some power development exercises make you feel bad, I mean, like some standing qigong is really bad for you. And, if you're doing it the wrong way, I mean, I've had blood clots and all kinds of crazy stuff, just from doing things not quite right, and so, but nobody I work with seriously. And then, as far as teaching goes, I was teaching a small group up until COVID. And then when COVID happened, we stopped everybody training, and I kept working with just a handful of like the senior people. And so I still work with them. I haven't started teaching like publicly again. I probably will. It's just been one of those things I haven't started. I'll probably do it again this summer or something. And I like to teach in the park. I like to do it early in the morning. Like I like that old school way. So, but we'll probably start that up in the summer. But the other guys I just work with privately.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the weapons in your system, because I know earlier you had said, when you were doing karate, you had a real interest in weapons, and so I know that Bagua systems and your system in particular definitely has some weapons, but I was just curious, like what types of weapons do they have? I know in like Liang style, say they have some specialty weapons like the chicken claw.
Yeah,
chicken hooks,
cool.
and they have some of that other stuff. And I was wondering, do you have any sort of specialty weapons in your system? And then within your system, like, what's your favorite weapon?
Yeah. The one that we all do is the Dao, the big saber.
Right.
We have a big, long, it's called the nine dragon rolling hand saber form. So it's this big, long form. It takes about 10 minutes to do, which is really strange considering all our other forms are so short and the saber form is crazy long. But we have that. That's the one everybody's supposed to start with. Mm-hmm. And then we do the long straight sword, so how Bagua has those comically large weapons. Yeah. The sword so we do those. Those are the two that most people in Yin style, or at least our Yin style Bagua do. Then, Hajin Bao, he teaches exercises for the 9-foot spear. And I learned a few of those exercises, but I think they're mainly just for power development, because we never talked about doing like applications or techniques with them. It was more just how you get your waist into it and how you get your body into it. The way those guys teach the saber and the straight sword are a lot about just body mechanic, body movement, because like a Shaolin saber, for example, is pretty short. Yeah. So you can whip that saber around your body, but that big, heavy, Bagua saber, they say, your body moves around the saber instead of the saber moving around your body. So you're, it's out and you're having to roll your body around it and whatnot so that you don't hurt yourself and so that you can actually use it. Mm-hmm. Those are the common ones. Schaefer he talked about the deer antler knives, and his were actually just deer antlers, and I know that's really controversial. Some people say, well, they never really were called that, but that's what he had, and he got them from Mun Bao Jun. So I don't know what to say about it. So when I asked him how we should use those, he said, just do your regular forms with them, So, I play with that a little bit. We don't have the repertoire of, weapons forms that some Bagua systems have. I know there's some Bagua systems that they've got the double-ended spear and they've got the saber and they've got I think those are cool and I would love to learn them, but mostly because I would be geeking out on it more than anything. But the two I do the most are the straight sword and the saber. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't really like lifting weights.
Speaking of that, I saw this wicked picture of you with this beautiful 8-pound. What is that? A shot put, Jack? Yeah. Do you have a method of training that you use with one or two of those?
Yeah. So this is actually, it's not really, this is kind of my invention in a way. So way back in the day, Chemo Wall, he gave me these railroad bearings, bearings. I don't know what part of a train they are, but they're about as big as my palm. And he would have you hold them in like what we call an ox tongue palm. So you're pinching them in with your thumb. And then he have you do all your forms with them. So he's like, it's better than using iron rings or using wrist weights and stuff because you have to hold them with your hands. And I liked that because I had felt my grip getting stronger and you had to do everything really smooth so you didn't hurt yourself. And so I just kept that. And so now I started doing, like I'll do my Bagua forms with those things, one in each hand. And, or hold them out in different postures and circle walk or something like that. Sometimes I do that with ankle weights too. That was one of the things that Dr. Shea was like, wear weights on your ankles. And, if you can't practice a lot, you can practice harder. But, that worked. And so then, what I wanted to do though is like the saber is pretty heavy. And when you're doing it in one hand, if you're really not careful, your hand that's not holding the saber can sometimes get too loose because you're supposed to be putting as much force into the empty hand as you are in the hand that's holding the saber, so that you can balance your body and that so you can put more force into the saber. It's really weird. If you let that hand die, your whole body sort of falls into one side. But if you can keep that force in the other hand. And so I started experimenting with using a shot put in my other hand because it weighs about the same as my saber. And so I would hold that and do like turn circles. And I was like, oh, this is cool. So then I would start doing some of the movement patterns, holding that shot put and, training that. And actually, other than being an amazing workout, it actually really got me a lot more force and connection in my saber hand. And so then when I put the saber down, my hand is naturally putting more force into it. And so I can drill through it better and use it a lot more strongly. So yeah, that was an experiment that really went somewhere good.
That's awesome. That's amazing when something like that pays off.
Yeah, I agree. I like the, like those Taiwanese schools, they really are very interested in using tools for power development, like I know you watched Will Wayne's series on Taiwan, right? When Monkey Steals Peach, and those guys had all those really amazing tools, and why not use tools? And I didn't see a lot of that stuff in the mainland, and I think that was just maybe a function of time, maybe a function of their culture, being post Cultural Revolution and all that stuff. Sure. I don't know. I know that they just didn't have a lot of stuff. Like there weren't a lot of good antique weapons anymore, or even good weapons makers, or it was, I don't know. But all those tools that they use in Taiwan, I think are great. The big spear, the sledgehammer. Like I like to use a sledgehammer instead of a staff sometimes. Just because you've got a lot of weight. So you have to learn to use your body a little bit differently. And then when you grab the staff has got a different motion to it, So
very cool.
That's where that came from. Yeah.
Very cool. I'm not going to try to stir hornet's nest by asking this question, but it was something because I probably have listened to you and our mutual buddy, Robert Kuhn's interview with him probably 5 or 6 times. And I love that. I love that interview. I think you did an awesome job there.
Oh, thanks.
And with your Longmen lineage, why have you not studied their martial culture as well?
You mean like the
Wudang or the Taoist temple stuff?
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you, because Longmen has a Taoist lineage. There's no martial arts.
Okay,
okay, like it's just Taoism. It's just the goal of Chuanzhen Longmen is realization, So it's lots and lots of meditation and other associated Taoist practices and whatnot. But the martial arts of Wudang, they consider themselves, those are like, Shenmen lineage and Sanfeng Pai, like they're sort of Longmen adjacent,
Okay. Right.
But I love to watch them.
Sure.
I'm a supporter of what they do. I helped Xuanyuan Zhou, like I helped him put on a sword seminar in Boulder because he wanted to travel and teach, and so I'm a supporter of what they do. I love what they do. I don't have a lot to say about it in terms of, everybody knows the history of modern Wudang martial arts, so not much to say about that. I've never even been to Wudang, so I spent all my time in Qingchengshan in Sichuan is where I spend most of my time, or in Baiyangguan in Beijing. I've been to one of my teachers is not far from Wudang, but he doesn't do martial arts. He's all like medicine and qigong and Taoist ritual and stuff. So I've never been in a situation where I could learn it.
Okay.
And I've never really been that hungry for it.
Okay.
It's a great answer. I already have, I have plenty of Qigong. I have plenty of martial arts. Yeah. I don't really like their Bagua that much. I don't like that. That's that modern, takeoff of Jiang style. And it's okay. I mean, I have a friend who's really good at it, and I love watching him practice, but it's not really for me. My body doesn't like it very much. I like yin style because I have the opportunity to do things that are hard for me and things that are good for me and things that are not good for me, and things that are easy, and I have lots of variations. But yeah, that's probably the best way I can answer that question. Is I've never had the opportunity, and never really missed it.
So I wanted to sort of riff on that and ask you sort of how did you get started with your journey, your Taoist journey? I was really interested in that.
Yeah, so in my teens when I was learning meditation and all that, like I said, my dad was a dabbling Buddhist, I call it. He wasn't real serious, but he was very interested in it, had lots of books. He gave me lots of things to read. And I have this affinity for Taoism. And I think at first it had to do with a lot of the sort of things that you would see in Kung Fu movies and stuff. Sure. The magic of Taoist priests and the religious Kung Fu and all that stuff. But as I got older and I started reading more and more, I just started getting more and more drawn into what it was. And I wanted to learn Taoism. I wanted to learn more about it. In college, I studied Japanese and I studied Chinese and classical Chinese. And because I didn't want to use translators, I didn't like the idea of relying on somebody else to translate for me. So I started studying those things so I could have access to texts, because there wasn't a lot of good stuff written in English. And, largely, like, especially when we were younger, Taoism at first is like, we're led to believe it's like, oh, it's Tai Chi and Qigong and, that's Taoism. And so that I was like, wow, a religion about martial arts. This is amazing. And that's really, I think, probably my first entree. But then as I started to get to know it, I was like, this is really cool. This approach to the mind and the universe and cosmology and natural sciences. And I started just studying more and more of it. I took some classes about it in college, and, that at CU had some really great Taoist classes,
cool.
Yeah. Like, Terry Kleeman, for example, one of the great scholars of Taoism, is a professor at CU. And so, that, I was fortunate enough to take some really great classes when I was, in college, and I really wanted to learn more about it, but I didn't. At a certain point, I was like, this isn't going to happen. There's just nobody who's really teaching Taoism in the West. There's just nobody here. I got involved with the Tibetan Buddhist community when I was in Chinese medicine school, and I loved it, but I couldn't handle Tibetan. My brain, I think, was already full of Japanese and Chinese, and I just couldn't learn the language. And I didn't want to rely on the translators, and it was just the community that I was involved with. I think they were a little bit toxic as a group. And and in the end, it really wasn't Taoism. And so I had kind of given up. I mean, I went to China after I finished Chinese medicine school, and I stayed there for a while studying Chinese medicine, and went back and forth working with Xie, and, and he would talk about Taoism. And I was like, man, I really wish I could just learn more about Taoism. And for him, he would talk about it, but that he wasn't a serious Taoist. He was still just a layperson. And so I'd kind of given up on it. And then a few years later, I had gotten involved with a community here in the States that was, trying to organize Taoist teachers and whatnot. And so I was like, okay, I'll see what this is about. And I started spending some time with them. And that happens to be where I met Josh Painter. He joined the community about the same time I did. And we both had really similar histories and really similar personalities, and we got along really well. And we started translating because we thought, well, God, some of these scripture books need to be in English, so let's translate. And so we just became friends by translating. And little by little, we got, more and more involved in these translations. And then a friend of ours who was a former member of that community is like, hey, I got introduced to a teacher in China, and I'm going to go. I want you guys to go with me. And so we were both like, okay, let's go. And so we went, we met her. She turned out to be the abbess of the Jianfu Gog on Qingcheng Mountain in Sichuan. And she took us as students, and she's like, I'll be here for you. I'm happy to teach you. We had Genfen. We had some kind of relationship. I can't explain it. And that turned into a pretty legit student-teacher relationship. And from there, she was the one who gave us our ordination and opened it. All of a sudden, all these doors opened up, and we met teachers who have become like our medicine teachers and our exorcistic teachers and our ritual teachers. And, to this point, I have an ordination with her, and I have an ordination with a teacher in Zhejiang, and this other one, not far from Wudong that I mentioned earlier. And I also have a Maoshan ordination with a guy, and, all these doors just start opening in just momentum. I can't even really explain it, because we just sort of, from that moment and starting to work with her, all the years and years of reading and studying Daoism on our own and in school started to really click and make sense. And then she opened doors to other teachers. And we, at the same time, so Josh Painter and I were walking in the mountains in Qingcheng, and we were just talking about this topic, like how, because his history is similar, just how much it sucked being a Westerner trying to learn legitimate Taoism, and how it was hard to find. There were a lot of charlatans. There were a lot of misrepresentations, a lot of good intentions going the wrong way, and wouldn't it be great if something were available? And we decided, that's how Parting Clouds actually came to be, was through that conversation. We were just like, why don't we just do that? Let's just put something together. Let's create this opportunity to help other people. And at first, I think it was really like, let's help other people get here, meaning China, and help them meet teachers. And then the teachers started to talk to us about curriculum and having us teach things. And we started to develop curriculum. And so now, we have we run this program, and we run Parting Clouds as like a educational / community. So people come, and maybe they're there to take the classes, but really what we're trying to develop are a community of Western Taoists, people who can just be there for each other, study together, rising tide floats all boats kind of idea.
Absolutely.
And then now our curriculum is really largely based on how the Chinese Taoist Association, who they actually found us on one of our trips there. This abbot filmed us doing some chanting and put it on WeChat, sort of their Facebook, and it made it all around the country. And then next thing you know, the friend of ours who was dragging us around, he said, so the Chinese Taoist Association just called me. We need to go back to Beijing. They want you to come in for a meeting.
Hopefully it wasn't bad.
No, it was great, because what they wanted to do is they wanted to meet us and see who we were and see what we were doing. And we developed this relationship with them. They want to, use our translations and wanted help, like with curriculum and things like that. And so
that's great.
Our curriculum now is really in alignment with like what they want people to go through to take tests, to make ordinations and things like that. It's actually like, I can't even tell you how it's all just happened on its own in a lot of ways. Like there's just this momentum, and we're just along for the ride, and things keep opening up, and we keep finding teachers and finding teachings, and, COVID couldn't even shut it down.
Hey, man, you got to be grateful for those blessings, right?
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, very much so.